Organissima, New York. Your exotic skin, hair, and beauty source, and your one-stop shop for all your natural and organic skin and hair care, featuring authentic organic Moroccan oil and prickly pear seed oil and much more. Bringing you only the best, straight from the source and proudly produced in the USA. So what are you waiting for? Shop today at www.organissima.com. Organissima, New York. Your beauty is our duty. Organissima, New York.
Well, hello and welcome back to the iHealth channel, iHealth Radio, with your host, Hurricane H. New day, new show, new topic, new guest, special guest, who will take us to a journey that we all probably can understand a little better. And that is the journey of connecting our mind, body, heart, spirit, and all that consciousness that goes with it and all the conditions. And how do we put it practically in our lives, whether it's personal, business, and so on and so forth. Our guest is actually a psychologist by trade, a keynote speaker, a person that has expertise in various areas, including spirituality, Ayurveda, and many, many more things. And of course, I can never do justice introducing someone more than what they can tell us about themselves. So without any further ado, I have with me today, Hema Vyas, all the way from the UK, from London. So Hema, how are you?
I'm really well, Hurricane. Great to be here today.
Well, great to have you. Thank you for being on the show and for really for your willingness to come on and share with us the value and some of the insights. We thrive actually on getting good information to share with our audiences, and really the mission is to educate them, enlighten them, inspire, and motivate, and all that good stuff. Reading through your background, I mean, you just have a tremendous background, over 30 years of real connection with people and leaders and corporate world and teaching them how to really be better and how to put it all together. As I said, the heart, the mind, the body, the spirit. That's a lot of stuff. That's all of us as humans. So first things first, why don't you tell us a little bit about your history, your background, your specialty, and the things that you've achieved so far?
Yeah, so quite a lot to pack in. I'll make it really succinct. So I would say that, my history has really been a blend of academia and spirituality. I was born into the sort of spiritual space, coming from an Indian background. And spirituality was very much a big part of my life growing up. I took it for granted. And then, growing up in England, I followed the sort of academia and really, really, really interested in wanting to help people really understand who they are and how to be better at who they will be. And so, of course, I fell upon psychology and studied psychology, and then realized that actually it was very limiting, because there were lots of things I was studying in psychology that I would say, my mind was already sort of running ahead, thinking, well, there's more to this than what you're talking about, and what evidence there is, what empirical evidence there is, what science is saying. Because, when I was 14, I had an out-of-body experience. I had a car accident, and while I was lying on the floor waiting for an ambulance to come and pick me up, my consciousness left my body and followed some of my friends, thinking I would try and get them back. But of course, they couldn't hear me because I was there in spirit and not in physical form. And that really shaped a lot of, who I've become. At the time, I didn't realize it. At the time, it was so normal to me. At the time, it was so natural that that's what would have happened. I didn't question it. It was only when I was met with resistance during my psychology training, when people were like, no, you can't talk about spirit, you can't talk about heart, and no, that's got nothing to do with it, and we're human, and we're having, we have to look at behavior and cognition and the mind and the brain. And I'm going, but you're missing out on a whole lot of other stuff. And so, you know, for a while, I sort of tried to follow that path, fell into corporate world, doing consultancy, psychometric testing, developing staff, etc. And I, again, still felt there was something missing. And what was really missing, you know, for me, Hurricane, was really hard. You know, the absence of a whole part of our lives that makes us human. You know, the idea that we can't talk about love, that we can't talk about heart, that we can't talk about spirit, that we can't talk about a universal energy, God, call it whatever you want to call it. This idea that we can't have faith, that everything has to be science-based, you know, was so alien to me as a person. And even though I studied and you know, followed that sort of path, I realized that there's so much more. And I had to make a choice at some point to go, well, either I do what is good for my career or I do what is good for me. And, you know, that's a distinction. And that's what I now help people with. Really, really understanding that when I followed my heart, when I did what was good for me, I actually, you know, became incredibly successful and loved every moment of what I was doing. So, you know, it wasn't work anymore. Whereas before it was a lot of work, and it was a lot of work trying to fit in with, you know, a paradigm that didn't really work for me, or fitting in with people who didn't see the world the way that I did. But when I expressed it in my way, they often agreed. And I'm like, but if you agree, why can't we talk about love? Why can't we talk about heart? Why can't we talk about these things that are intangible and yet so, so important? And so that was, you know, the sort of what really, you know, pushed me, and I keep on pushing myself now, constantly wanting to be creative, innovative, and really wanting to help bring people together, really understanding the heart energy, really understanding the interconnectedness of who we are and how we utilize that for a better world, not just business success, but success in every aspect of our lives.
Well, thank you. Well, so I want to just to take a minute and just kind of talk about this introduction. I mean, ultimately, early on, the accident experience was a big component of a change in your life. It took some time. You went through the education system. You went to psychology. Interestingly enough, you went to psychology and nothing else, which is I guess a branch that is unique in itself, because it does have a little bit of philosophy. There's some science. You know, there's a lot of stuff, but also it might be sometimes potentially controversial or maybe resistant to religion and maybe other things, because it's the facts are different, right? And to your point, your background is a little bit more spiritual, and you've grown into that realm, and really put in the balance between the two, just within yourself. I think that is a challenge in itself, because you need to understand the connection first before you can even go there. And then it appears that you took a stand and had to make a choice as to which way do you lean. I mean, do I go just with, this is what I've learned, or maybe there's more to this, and let me see if I can go beyond and challenge the actual status quo? When you did. And here we are today, you know, years later, with much more, you know, improvements that you've brought to people's lives. But I wanted to also highlight the concept, because psychology is one science or one system, right? That defines things, you know, humans in a particular way. And there's chemistry, there's all these things, and obviously it is a deep and it's valid and it works. But you know, there is the other portion of the world where there are people that are spiritual. There are different, you know, beliefs. You mentioned God. I think anybody, whether they believe it or not, they have some sort of a belief in an entity that is beyond us, right? There is the energy. There is the, you know, like, again, I made the joke the other day on one of the shows about the Greek mythology, the ghost in the machine, which you almost refer to as consciousness leaving your body, you know, at that experience. So there is somebody running the show, and this is the actual avatar, right? So these concepts can sound sometimes very like cuckoo, or maybe, I mean, funny that I said that word, because psychology and cuckoo, you know, I like a little bit of a almost a fun joke there, but the concept is like, when you start talking about this, people say, wait a minute, I think you've read so many books, you've gone to the other tangent, right? And what we do need to bring to the audience here is that there is the human, that's us. But there is beyond the human that we see. There's what controls this human. There's the connections. You mentioned about the heart, following your heart consciousness. Those are all elements that we need to understand better. So you obviously done that, and you've done a lot of corporate leadership training and individuals training and sessions, and you've spoken all over the world about these things. So let's break that down. So the human, let's define it under your perspective. How would you define an actual human connecting all these things?
So I think as human beings, I think that we're unique. And I think that we all come here with our own unique destiny and our own blueprint of who we are, because what makes us unique is that we live in a world where, if you think about us as energy, I believe that we're made up of energy and information, and the uniqueness comes from our unique set of information. So, you and I we could literally be twins, and yet we would have such different experiences, because it's how we perceive the world, how we take in information, and how we relay that information, and what stories we turn that information into that makes us uniquely us, that makes us individual. So, there's a whole thing in psychology, nature versus nurture. Is it nature? Is it nurture? What is it? Is it our genealogy? Is it our DNA? Is it our environment? What is it? And I'd say, it's all of the above. Being human is really about a whole host of experiences that either belong to us or that we've inherited. So, if you think about DNA and our genes, it's made up of not just who I am, but it's made up of who my mum is and her ancestors and her grandparents, and my dad and his ancestors and his grandparents, and then all the impact of the environment, where I've grown up, and the peers and the teachers and the influences. So all of these things make up who I am, and it makes up each of who we are. And so therefore, I think to really, really understand somebody else, it's not easy. I think really it's about really tuning into the heart space and really, really recognizing that there is a uniqueness to each person. And when we really are able to do that, we're able to respect them so much more. We're able to give them, the kind of validity that they require in order to be seen, to be heard. And I think human beings are really here with a purpose. And part of that purpose for me, from my perspective, is to evolve. And evolution is not necessarily about success in the typical sense of the word. It's not just about being successful in our careers. It's about being successful as human beings. And I think the journey of being a human, yes, there are external things we are all striving for. We all want a level of happiness, a level of love, a level of success, a level of financial independence, financial success, wealth, and health, of course. But I also think we also are here to live out our purpose. And so for me, a human being is complex and yet so simple. Because what makes us simple is that the heart knows of me.
Well, thank you. And that's pretty interesting. I mean, because you said it, we're complex yet simple. And really understanding that, I think that is really the core of this, right? And when you get to that moment where you understand that connection and how you are on both sides, I think you're at a better level or a higher level at that time of understanding and consciousness. So you being a psychologist, understanding how the mind works, how the people work and behavior and things like that, and then leaning towards this other component. And it's funny because as you were talking, I was thinking about a documentary I watched a long time ago by a Turkish writer. So he's a writer and he does these documentaries. Harun, I think that's his name. And I think the documentary was about 20 minutes, and it was called The Secret Beyond Matter. And when I watched that thing, it was like, I kind of just had to pause for a minute. it almost reset my way of thinking about the world. And some people say like, well, wait a minute, you go into the extreme here. But, obviously I understand the rules of engagement in this world to a degree. And of course, there's so much that we need to learn more. But with science and everything else, even religion combined, you get to understand a little bit more. But when I watched that documentary, it almost hit exactly what you said. The way we connect with this world is different. And so in that documentary, the way he described this is that we obviously use our senses to understand this world. I mean, basically our senses is what we know, how this world operates. I mean, you see, therefore you can connect, with the world. You can see colors, you can see people, you can see shapes. You hear, that gives you the other piece. You smell, I mean, when you get a flu or cold, or God forbid, that now with the COVID, we hear about, losing the sense of smell or taste. You understand that, you're disconnected. You don't know anymore. So he was describing it from this angle, and then that really everything is being perceived by what he referred to as eventually a soul. And so that's the other part. I mean, you refer to it as consciousness leaving your body, but we have different ways of describing it. But at the end of the day, there is that, right? And then we have, you mentioned DNA, or the physical aspect of who we are. But then there's also the non-physical aspect of who we are, which is to your point, where energy. I mean, there's physics that claim that everything is 99% empty. I mean, we have electrons, we have protons, and everything is a blank in between. So 90% of everything is really emptiness. So again, when you start putting all these concepts together, people say, well, I don't want to know all this. This is like too crazy. I just want to know that I live, I exist. This is my being. That's it. We go beyond this, and now we get into this whole world of understanding the dynamics, and that gets a little crazy. And well, crazy just because people don't, they define it. Sometimes we define crazy as things that we don't understand, because that's easy for us to label them that way and keep them that way. But sometimes we need to be able to open ourselves to hearing these things. Now, we don't have to accept it, we don't have to believe in it, but at least understanding it from a different angle. It's always good to know what's the other angle. Either you're going to accept it or refuse it, but that's okay. But now you know. So again, it was just interesting when you were talking, and I just connected to something that really affected me a long time ago when I saw that documentary. And to a degree, I kind of understand that concept, believe it or not. I see that value, because, when you sleep, for example, you are basically in a state of temporary death. Let's call it for what it is. At least that's how I define it. But you're alive though. You are living. There's your dream. In a dream world, you really exist. You have a physical being in that world. You have connections. It feels so real that even there are studies that have been made where people that go, to sleep and they do these tests on them, they have almost reactions to things that they have in a dream in their body. Including bruising and other things, right? So this is very complex, and most of the human mind will probably be like, that's too much information for me. I don't want to get to that point because it's going to confuse me. But nevertheless, it is reality. We have to sometimes question things or ask the questions, and so that brings us to the concept of the heart. You mentioned you followed the heart. So the heart for us physically, we know what the heart is. It's an organ. I think this is a deeper meaning of the heart. What is that? How do you really define the heart in this particular case?
Yeah, I mean, great question. And, I agree with you, Hurricane. I think a lot of people, just like with everything in life, right? It's like we don't need to understand physics in order to understand, that a plane can take off. Obviously a lot of thought and intelligence has gone into creating, the perfect sort of setup for a plane to be able to take off with hundreds of people in it or whatever it might be. And of course, most of us don't care about, how that's come together, in the same way we don't care about the, pilots and what they've learned to fly the plane. And I think in the same way, we're like, well, we don't really care about the mechanics of who we are. We just care about why we do what we do and how we can be happy and how we can be successful, etc. And I think there's a real truth in that, that's where people's attention goes. And so I think the reason why I talk about the heart the way that I do is because I do want people to understand that while we may not really particularly want to get involved in the fundamentals of, how these things work or why they work or if they work, that there's something about connecting with the heart energy that actually raises our consciousness, that takes us away from this idea that we are physical beings. If we are too cerebral, if we are too stuck in the physical, we live what I call a linear life. And that, A takes us to B, takes us to C, takes us to D. And now we recognize with quantum physics, for example, that, things aren't always linear and things exist outside of time and space. And so for me, there's a physical heart that exists in a linear space. And we know life as the past, the present, and the future. And then there is also the quantum heart, the spiritual heart, the true heart, which is really the space and place within us where the soul, where consciousness really resides, where we exist. Also, we exist in the physical realm, like you say, when we're sleeping, we're here, and anybody looking in on us would go, oh yeah, they're asleep in their bed, and yet we could be traveling all sorts of places. We could be dreaming about and feeling like we're really somewhere else or doing something or whatever it might be. And that's where we experience the non-linear. That's where we experience a quantum. And for me, that's what heart is. And the heart is that space that connects us both to the physical and connects us to the spiritual, connects us to the linear world that we live in, but also gives us the tools, the knowingness of how to connect to the non-linear aspect of ourselves, which is where, magic exists, where, inspiration exists, where creativity exists, where everything that, hasn't really yet been brought into life exist. And that's where we can bring into existence whatever it is that we want. We don't have to live in a linear world where there is struggle, where there is time, where there are limitations, where we are, limited by our capacities or limited by our experiences or limited by our thinking. The heart is a space where there is expansion, where we can be more creative, where we can create magic, where miracles exist. And really, if we really want a meaningful life, I think we need to be able to tap into the heart space, because we're not just here to live this life of, growing up and hopefully having a good home and, a good education and getting a good job and meeting somebody, falling in love and having a family and repeating the whole cycle. That's not what we're here for. We're really here to thrive. We're here to flourish. We're here to evolve. And so the heart is a space that takes us between worlds and bridges the gap between who we are and who we can be, who we have been and who we can become. What we have done and what we can do, that is beyond time and space.
Well, thank you. And so that leads us to the next question. And so how do we, or at least in your experience, how do you help people tap into the quantum heart, the real, connection? Because it sounds intriguing, but for people like, well, I don't know how to do that. I just know that I have these, template lifestyles that I just know that that's how it's supposed to work. We all go to school. We all have to get a job. We, to your point, family, this, that, and that's living the life. But sometimes people also would define, what you are referring to maybe as intuition, as a feeling, as inclination, but people don't really define it well, and they don't know how to get into it. Sometimes you feel something and you just say, you know what, my gut feeling says this. There is that like almost a aha moment, like this is it. This is no more for me. I'm going to do whatever it takes, and I'm moving, I'm changing. But how do you help someone really get in within and extract that, get into that deep level where, like, they're not just shallow, but they're really in the depth here, and oh, this is a whole new world. It's like the Matrix, right? Coming out of, to the real world. So how do you help people? And is that even a possibility?
Yeah. Great question. Great question. So I would say that, of course, it's a possibility. And so a lot of my life work has been about that. And, as I've evolved and as I've helped so many people over the years, I've got better and better at getting people there quicker and quicker. So once upon a time, I would have said it's a real process. I still would say it's a process. But I think the first thing that needs to happen is a shift in perspective. And that's where education and information comes into play. As I said before, when you asked me to define being human, it's about being energy and information. And it's about how we interpret that information, how we turn that information into stories. And so what I teach is really helping people, get that education, get that understanding, which gives them that aha moment, that gives them that recognition that actually maybe there's something to what she's saying. So that education about, what the heart is, how to tap into it in terms of really being able to do that inner work, being able to really, really look at who we are, self-reflect, introspection, really being able to step into a space where we go, okay, I don't have to keep on being who I think I am. I can actually let go of a lot of the conditioned things. See, becoming more of who we are is not about becoming more, doing more. It's about letting go. It's letting go of all the things that we are not, letting go of all the things that don't really resonate on a heart level. Really being able to understand when the heart is in tune and when it's not. Being able to go inside of ourselves and, through meditation, through yoga, through being in nature, different practices like journaling, learning the art of dreaming, learning the art of fantasy, how to use our imagination. There's so many tools. When we get that education that gives us a shift in perspective, that we are more than we think we are, and we are more than simply our past experiences and more than our physical presence, then I think we're able to then really, really be able to feel the subtlety of when we're in our hearts and when we're not. And it is a process in the sense that you have to go through a journey of letting go and a journey of clearing up the old debris, clearing out all thoughts, feelings, memories, and not just compartmentalizing. You see, as human beings, Hurricane, I really believe that the reason why we've disconnected a lot from the heart, even the most beautiful, heartfelt people, sometimes struggle to really, really be in their heart. And I think it's because we've learned to compartmentalize. Everything is, it's like, okay, pull yourself together. You might be having a bad day, but now you're going to be doing this show. So put everything else aside. And we don't know how to be real. So one of the things that I teach is that level of authenticity. So, all the things that really go into becoming a great leader is really about how we are better people, how we become better human beings. And for me, all of the qualities that connect us with our heart are the qualities that make us great leaders, are the qualities that make us happier, are the qualities that allow us to be more successful and more prosperous. And so how I get people to do that is really, first and foremost, education, and then the tools, like teaching them the, aspects of meditation, not just meditation as something to go off and do to manage stress, but to really utilize meditation as a really incredible, powerful tool, and how to use that to really step back into your heart. Because stepping into your heart is an everyday occurrence. We just don't stay there. We jump straight out and go straight into our head with the world of doing. And it's about coming back into how we learn to be and be in that moment and be in our hearts.
Okay, thank you. So that actually, leads me to this concept here. You're helping people. First of all, there's got to be a willingness for folks to be helped, because again, you can't help people that don't want to be helped, right?
Absolutely.
But also there are not stigmas. I think there are stigmas to all this, but there's also influences. Let's call it for what they are. The influences to the upbringing of each and everybody, right? And every person somehow, somewhere, have learned some taboos, and based on whatever their culture, their religion, there could be a lot of resistance. in terms of really getting into this. I don't care what religion it is that we belong to.
Mhm.
There's always that science, religion, and the unknown. And believe it or not, in some religions, they all can connect and be coherent. But a lot of people don't even know that, or don't know how to transit from one to the other, or even connecting the dots between all those components. But you are dealing with humans, trying to help them, but there's so much baggage with them in terms of like what they carry in, and everybody, whether it's from what they hear in the news, what they've been taught at school, what they've been taught at home, or their religious, organizations. But that's all, something that you have to like almost peel out to get in, because, or at least I show them that it can all exist or coexist without a problem. But that's a big challenge. It's overwhelming. How I mean, first of all, have you experienced that? Is that real? And how do you deal with that?
Absolutely, it's real. Absolutely. Because we all come with this sense that who we think we are is who we think we are. And nothing is going to change that. And so the idea that I am, I live in England and my religion is this and my background is this and this is where I come from. We think that defines us. And unfortunately, people get stuck in that space. And that's what I mean. We're stuck in that sense of survival. We're stuck in that sort of physical world where things can't shift so easily, because matter doesn't shift so easily. Energy shifts easily, but matter doesn't. And so, of course, I meet a lot of resistance. But I'll tell you, a lot of my work, really came from people being at a point where, like most faith, a lot of people turn to faith when there's nowhere else to turn to. So usually it's crisis points. So when people get to a crisis point, they don't know where else to turn, they don't know what else to do. That's when they will often seek me out. And now I feel like things are changing. So part of wanting to sort of speak to people like your audience is really wanting people to say, well, you can get there sooner. You don't have to wait for crisis to recognize that there can be so much more to your life. And, that's one of the things I really, really want to educate people on. Often it is that moment of crisis where they literally don't know what else to do, that they will go, well, I'll try anything. And when they are willing to try anything, and that's when they see the results of trying what I suggest, and when they really try and they get those results, then the word spreads. And that's how I really built my business. The word has continued to spread. And as I've said, to sort of lots of people, often people don't know what it is that I do for them. I know what it is. I can name it. I help them declutter. I help them declutter and let go of the baggage, let go of their old conditioned thoughts, feelings, and beliefs. So, I studied hypnotherapy and I used to work using that as a tool. So very similar to meditation. And one of the things that I used to say is that, I don't hypnotize you. You have been hypnotized by the world. I am here to dehypnotize you. I am here to wake you up to a better reality, a truer reality. And so that's really the sort of job that I'm doing. But the resistance is there, and especially in groups. You can imagine, in a corporate setting, because there's somebody who really believes in it, a leader who believes in it, and they want it for the team, and there's a lot of resistance and they're not really there. And, again, I really honor the heart, because everyone's got their journey. If they're not ready to wake up to it, then that's absolutely fine. I have no doubt that they will. And I've seen this again and again and again. I've had people who are like, no, you're not for me. I don't believe this. I don't agree, or whatever. And years later, they are speaking my language and they're literally saying what I would have said to them years ago. And so I love it when I see that. Years ago, I remember, university, you cannot talk about the heart. What do you mean that the mind and body are one? No, they're two separate. What's more important, the mind or the body? And it's like, no, they're one. They're absolutely one. And of course, they wouldn't agree with me. The lecturers didn't agree with me, marked me down. Luckily, I had the power of my own conviction to sort of follow through with what I believed. And that's what I'm finding, that in 10 years, 20 years in a hurricane, I genuinely believe everybody will be speaking about this as if it's a non-event. I think people will be speaking about heart in business as if it's absolutely the norm. And they're going to look back at decades gone by going, did people not get it? I really believe that they're going to be saying that. And I look forward to that day.
Well, listen, I mean, you're certainly doing the work and there's the need. And I think world events will trigger that need and conviction, which leads me to the question of we talked about will, but
Mhm.
also passion, also purpose. Because you mentioned leaders and corporate, in the corporate world, and they convinced to something and they want to get everybody to buy in. And that those two keywords, purpose, passion, will, I mean, there's a couple of words are like powerful, and without them,
Yes.
people are not going to be driven. And it's funny because you almost described the matrix. You're waking up to the real world, which you're conditioned to, like you're in the zone, like like a zombie land, and you're coming out of it and like, wow, this is all different. I mean,
Yeah.
it's amazing. Like, I was laughing. I had a little smirk when you actually mentioned that. But so
Yeah.
so certainly this concept of purpose, passion,
Mhm.
it is a differentiator, because in
Yes.
life, without those two things, I mean, to your point, you had resistance, and your convictions were there. No, I do understand there is a difference, but it's still one, and that's the thing. They are all separate components, yet they're one. And that's the
Exactly.
hard part to accept. Like, what do you mean they're one, but they're different? It's like you have all these elements working to make you, and that's all. I mean, that's a simpler way to define it, but you know, you can slice it anyway, and people will be like, okay, well, but because they're conditioned to, this is the definition you learn, and this is all you need to know, you almost like reveal this stuff to them in a different light and be like, oh wow, okay, I didn't see it on that angle. And that's for everything. So let's talk about the passion, the purpose,
Mhm.
the really the setting of goals. The that's the driver behind whether someone is willing to unveil and not.
Absolutely. Absolutely. So, I think that it's sort of one of those catch-22 situations. If people don't have the passion and they don't have that sense of purpose and they don't know what drives them, they don't know what they want, then they're not going to be motivated to do the work. And if they're not doing the work, they're not going to find their passion and purpose. So it's really, really an interesting situation, I would say, where part of my job is to really, really get them to tap into what it is that's really important to them. And some people, I would say, definitely the well has been lost, and the well has been lost. They know there's an unhappiness. And so often it is about looking at, how it manifests. So conflict, when there's chaos, when things aren't flowing, when there's disharmony, there are certain conditions that I would say are very indicative of the fact that people are not in their heart, and therefore they are not following their purpose, and therefore they are not living a most passionate life. And I think in order to come back to that space, it's really about making space. One of the main things that I teach is, how do we create space to become more of who we are? Because when we do that, then we find what really, really motivates us. When people say, well, help me find my purpose, I'm like, okay, well, let's get rid of a whole load of stuff, and your purpose is already there. It's again what I said, that the hearts know the way, and when we follow our hearts, they guide us. But we don't know how to get there. We don't know how to get into our heart space when we are doing a job we don't love, for example. How do we get back to that place of passion and purpose? And that's when we do the inner work. We do the inner work, and because when we develop ourselves, what we're really developing, Hurricane, is our consciousness. And when we develop our consciousness, what we're doing is we're becoming lighter. If you think of it in terms of energy, energy is really, really contracted and tight in a space where we're unhappy, when we're struggling, when there's chaos, when there's disharmony, when we're in conflict, when things are not going well. That is when there is a contraction of energy. And what we want to do is create space. When there's an expansion of energy, we feel lighter. And when we're lighter, inspiration flows. And when inspiration flows, that is how our purpose rises to the surface. It's always there. That's when we know what really, really motivates us, and we know how to use what motivates us to connect to our purpose, to connect to our hearts in a way that is actually possible in the world. Because we do live in a physical world. So we can't all be just sitting like monks in a little cave in the middle of a, mountain somewhere and just omming. So that's not what I'm about. When people sort of think about what I do, they think that's what I'm about. It's like, no, I'm here to help you live your best life here on this earth, on this planet, and be successful. And, if you really want to be happy and successful, don't do a job just because it pays the rent or it pays the bills or it pays the mortgage. Do it because you love it. How can we all do what we love and yet keep functioning as a society? And that's where I think the heart energy comes into it. For me, it's about the fact that the heart is connected to each and every living organism. The heart is connected to every aspect of life. And when our hearts are completely aligned with our mind, with our body, and when we're truly living from a heart space, we know how we can do something to be of service to the world, to get our financial needs met, our emotional needs met, our physical needs met, and still live with that space and place within us where there is passion, where there is will, where there is passion and power and purpose. And that is, why I'm so, like motivated to share about the heart space and to share about the heart energy, because I do believe we have within us a blueprint of how we can all be successful, we can all thrive, how we can all live with passion and purpose. And really, really find, that sense of prosperity in the world without depleting the world of its resources, without having to trample over other people, without having to, manipulate or coerce, or without having to kill off, aspects of the world unnecessarily in an unhealthy way, an unconscious way. We can do that. Passion and purpose is what we really live for. That's how it helps. That's how we evolve. That's how we find our joy. That's how we are of service and also receive that service from the universe. But I think that all exists within our hearts, and it's about clearing out the debris of what we don't want and who we are not, in order to find out who we are and what we do want and what is going to really give us the best life possible.
Wow. Well, that's pretty deep and pretty, I guess, concentrated, content there, because it is really, the core of things. I think one of the words you mentioned there is that, well, at least the ideas that you mentioned, that is very strong, is that we work, we do things, but sometimes, to your point, we just do them because it's just routine and we do it for the wrong reasons. And I mean, we all know this saying that, that's pretty common, where you never work a day if you do what you love. But you got to get to that stage to be able to realize that this is not for me. Yes, the change is going to be difficult and stuff, which now takes me to the idea of trust. And I think that's a big component. People sometimes don't trust the system. They don't trust themselves, or they are almost conditioned not to believe in themselves well enough, or everything around them to help them. Your concept, by getting them to dive into their true heart, will help them, I guess, almost be have some transparency on the real thing, and be able to really come up to raise to the occasion and make it happen. So what do you say to the trust truth, factor?
Yeah, I think that's what's lost in the world, and again, that comes from a disconnect from the heart, because if we're only operating at one level of what we're capable of, and we're not really connecting with another deeper level and really connecting with that heart space, then I think that, the trust erodes. Because if you think about it, as human beings, we've learned to rely on our senses, on sight, sound, smell, touch, feel, so we rely on these things. And of course, there is an element of intuition, which we all have, and that instinct that we all have. Mm-hmm. But ultimately, that's what we're relying on. And I would say that there is a lot of scientific evidence now that there is a connection to heart where there is a communication about what is true, regardless of what our senses tell us. And so, we pick up on, I think there's an organization, probably some of your audience might have heard, you might have heard of Heart Math, and they have done a lot of experiments on heart energy. And one of the things that I found fascinating, which is, very much in line with what I've always believed and known, which is that the mind will pick up on an image, but the heart picks up on it a lot sooner. So the heart picks up on it even before the image is on the computer screen, and the mind picks up on it just literally a few seconds later, but it's still a few seconds later. Now you translate that into the real world, and what that means is that, the heart is picking up on communication long before it's communicated. So I am picking up on what you're feeling even before you say it, and sometimes picking up on what you're not saying. And so there's so much in the world where there is, so much has been compartmentalized. We're not giving full information. We're giving half-truths, and all of this has eroded trust. And in business, that has particularly had a negative impact. You see, I think people lose a connection to their own purpose and why they're doing something, even if they love what they're doing or did love what they were doing, if there isn't that transparent communication. And that's where trust gets eroded. How do we build that trust? We start recognizing that the heart is communicating that truth. Therefore, we owe it to ourselves and therefore other people around us to be more transparent, to be more truthful. And that means sometimes owning the truth ourselves, because it's not that people aren't always truthful. I think that, certainly in my line of work, they don't even know what the truth is. Often people come to me and they'll say, oh, all of this is fine in my life. I just need you to help me with this one particular situation, this conflict that I have with this coworker or, this team member or whatever it might be. And then you sort of go, well, I think it's much more deeper than that, and, really there's this that I'm picking up on what you're saying. And when they stop and think about it, like I say, at first there might be resistance. They don't want to really hear it. They want to compartmentalize. I only want to deal with this one problem. And that's why I say, well, no, I want to look at the holistic aspect of it, because there's something more here. And when they really, really allow themselves to go there and are able to be honest with themselves, yeah, there's a problem there. There's a problem with the structure of the company or the culture of the company or whatever it might be, or leadership or whatever it might be. Then there's an openness, and then there is trust. Ultimately, it's trust in themselves. And I think we can't trust ourselves if we're not trusting what we're picking up on. And in order to trust what we're picking up on, we have to become extrasensory. So it's not just the 5-6 senses, it's that sense of not just a feeling, not just the instinct, not just the intuition, not just the logic, not just the facts, not just what we see, but really tuning into that which is intangible, something that is beyond conscious awareness. And when we tap into that, we are able to really, really tap into a deep sense of trust. And when we trust ourselves, we trust ourselves in the world. And it doesn't matter if certain situations or people cannot be trusted, because ultimately it's about learning to trust ourselves. And that's something that is so, so key to being successful in all aspects of our lives.
Well, thank you for that. And as I'm reflecting on your words, I'm thinking about, you mentioned the business world, which I actually belong to. I'm actually in the corporate world. And one of the things that you really highlighted there is that the lack of transparency, or because of an ideology of leadership, or because sometimes companies, they have their secret, sauce that is run by the top or, the senior staff, but there's not enough clarity and really crisp messaging to the team. So it affects all their like the spirit, their way, the innovation, which we'll talk about in a second, about the power of creativity here, and just how to, creative thinking, things like that. People are inhibited when they don't see that that the company is as clear. And similarly in society today, with everything that's going on, we hear in the news, you don't know who says the truth, what's going on, what's real, what's not real. And everybody's like, almost like, having a little bit of a guard up to just for everything. And whether it's in the world or in just the society we live in, it's almost a similar trend. And people now are almost like, barricaded. They just don't want to know, or they're afraid to put the guards down, and then it's over. But I think I've seen this in the corporate world, where some leaders, they have full transparency. When you want to do something, you want to explain the clear, process of what we're doing and why and what the rationale is. And then people have to buy in. And now they buy in through their own conviction, and they're like ready. Now they might refuse, they may not agree, and that's one thing, and then make a choice. That's great. But sometimes you don't have that. And I think that's a big problem in the business world in general, where only the few know what the picture is, and that's like it's a need to know basis, or you're not your pay grade. But I personally do not believe in that concept. I believe that when I present a proposition or a project or anything, this is the reason, this is why, and yeah, it might have some reaction, some stuff, but you need to understand why we're doing things and why I need you to do these things, and you want to buy the buy-in literally from them. And that's a different concept. And some people don't know how to do that. And in general, unless they tap into the reality of things and understanding how to get into that core heart and delivering, it is not easy. And a lot of people like that, even at the highest levels. And unfortunately, and again, I'm sure in your experience, you've seen that. And probably that's why you are helping some of these groups to transform that, to change that. So go ahead. I'm sorry.
Absolutely. I was just going to say that, if we want real people to work for us and with us, and we want them to be on board with the vision, whether it's a project, whether it's, the goal of the company, whatever it might be, I think we have to humanize them, really, really see that they are human beings. And the way to do that is to not feel like there's this, hierarchy and a need to know, and the lack of transparency, and just do your job because I say so. It's like with children. When you say do it because I say so, because I'm your parent, I'm the adult, it's like, that's not a way to be, It's like really, really respecting the fact that, and not everybody will want to know, but it's not about whether we're just being really honest and telling everybody everything. It's about the fact that we're willing to. If somebody asks, we should be willing to be able to say honestly and openly what is going on. And because it's that willingness that people pick up on. It's not necessarily whether, it's not whether you are telling me something or not. It's the fact that you're willing to tell me. So if something arises in me and it's like, Hurricane, I really want to know the answer. Why are we doing this? Mm-hmm. If you say, well, listen, I can't tell you that right now. All I need you to know is this, that is going to really play with me, because somewhere that story, that information that's lacking is going to create a story that I'm not somehow worthy. And that is going to demoralize me. And that's what leaders need to recognize, that, they are demoralizing the staff because there is this hierarchy, because there's this arrogance, and that needs to come down. Those walls need to come down, and we need to recognize the importance of what people are feeling on a heart level that is beyond even conscious awareness. If you ask them, are they unhappy? No. But if you look at what happens over time in an organization where there isn't that transparency, it is that lack of humanizing that I think that creates a sort of lack of, that morale, and therefore productivity, and therefore creativity, and therefore innovation. So, just wanted to add.
No, thank you. And it's funny because I had thought about this for so long. I mean, being in the leadership role and the corporate for many years, at the end of the day, everybody that works for anyone, any company, or even if you have your own business, at the end of the day, it is a business, right? And businesses are not created to be, even the not-for-profits are for profits. Let's call it for what it is. They just don't call it a profit. They just don't have dividends, right?
Yes, exactly.
But you're not in business to lose money. So any secrets that you're going to have, are not going to get you any results more than what it is. People are not stupid. They know that they work, for a living. Yes. And they will make you money. They will work, for whatever the corporation is to deliver a profit eventually. So the secret is there. I mean, it's out. We know it's for business and it's always going to be for profit. So no one is, the problem is when you think that people are not seeing through that, and you feel like, by shielding them from like what the plan is, that you're going to get results is a problem. If we are clear, say, listen, guys, we need to hit this target to be able to be profitable so we can grow and make money and we all can have an opportunity to grow. And I need you to do this, and now it shifts the whole paradigm. I mean, now it's like, oh, wow, we're needed. We are part of this. We're going to be part of success, the history. We're going to make this. And there's a chance for me to also meet my goals. That's one way. And some people say, you know what, I don't want to do this. Now, a person may feel that way. And that's when sometimes people go and become their own business owners. Corporate world is not for me. I want to start my own business. I don't want anybody to tell me what to do. Yeah, you go to your own business. It doesn't, actually, I own my business too. And I know both sides of the world. It doesn't change. You're still going to have, now you're going to have to be transparent yourself, or you're going to have to actually be transparent with yourself and be actually, deal with yourself and whoever is working with you. Either way, you're still going for the same purpose. So I think that's the problem. Like we almost try to ignore the reality just because we want to present it in that way. But the facts are the facts. Everybody knows that anyone out there, I always say this, I'm in sales. I always say this, there's nothing in this world that is not a sales transaction. Therefore, there is some sort of a money-making opportunity going on somewhere. It doesn't matter. We have a show here, while we're not exchanging money, you're providing a service. This is a media company. These are businesses, it's, the mission is one thing, but at the end of the day, our time is valuable. Everybody's time is valuable. Even when someone is listening, this is valuable thing that they can use to their own, merits. So I think that's where the psychology of this thing is amazing, where, you gotta get in there, figure out how to be out, with the teams, with the people and get them to see the value. And now you'll guarantee their buy-in, you guarantee their success, you guarantee the innovation, as you said, and the creativity. Guess what? More profit, more success. But if you don't do that, I mean, I've seen companies, in your case, you work with corporate leadership to develop these programs so you can elevate those companies and their staffing to the next level. That's great. I mean, that's actually where we need to be. And unfortunately, not everybody's seeing it that way. Sometimes it's cost. I mean, you invest a little bit of time and money and you'll get a lot more. Some people don't train enough people because they think that that's taken away from them. I'd rather spend some more time in training and get them out there, to do whatever they have to do. They'll be better at what they're doing. And again, if they buy the vision, they'll always be supporting it. If they don't buy the vision, I don't care who, what, where, whether it's a society or business is the same. You will never follow. You will never, be a contributing, a positive contributor. You'll be just like somebody that's like always, I don't want to deal with this. I'm not sure. I'm going to think about the next job. I'm going to think about this, as opposed to like, I'm here. I can do this. This is a good place. Let's make it work. So.
Absolutely.
Sorry, I had to go into that because it was interesting when you talked about that concept. It just triggered all that stuff.
Absolutely. Well, we're in sync with our thinking, and it's so true. And I think that's a short-sightedness of some people, some organizations, some leaders, and some businesses. It is short-sighted because there's now such a growing sort of number of evidence that shows that people are more productive when they're happier, and they're happier when they feel inclusive, when they're included in the vision, included in the information, and included in the dream, if you like, and really, how do you do that? You make sure that they do feel valued for what they bring to the space, and they get what they need. And like I say, not everybody's going to want that, but if they are getting that, they're not going to be going, right, I want to think about the next job, I want to move on. So there's something to be said for that for sure.
Well, listen, this hour has actually, I'm looking at the time, and we've hit the hour mark already. It went quick, and to be honest with you, it was just all positive value here. It's a different, it's a unique and different angle for potentially people that be like, where does that? I think, but the conclusion of what we've just covered right now, when you connect it to the beginning of the show, then they'll realize what it is, because really being understanding all this stuff will get you to be better, will get you to have the energy to have all these aspects, that will impact life positively. And that's a big change from where people are conditioned to. So, I mean, what I want to ask you is, are there any last advice that you want to just add to the session today? And finally, I want to also ask about how do we contact you? How do people can reach out to you? I will have all the description, of your background, things like that, as well as the website. But is there anything that you want to highlight specifically for the audiences?
Yeah, so just one last message, which is, we really owe it to ourselves to grow and evolve, to step out of the matrix, as you say, to break out of the sort of very, very deep hypnosis that we're all under, and recognize that as human beings, we have the ability to be so much more. We again, a cliche, we know that we are only using a very small percentage of our brain, even less than 10%. Even the most super smart people are using less than 10% of their brain's ability. And I'd say we're using even less than that of our heart's ability. And if we think that the brain has incredible ability and capabilities, the heart has so much more, because it connects the physical to the spiritual world. And, the spirit world is a part of us. We live in a universe. This planet is not on its own. We know there are other things out in the universe, and we're a part of that. And so we owe it to ourselves to grow, to educate ourselves, and to evolve, and to elevate ourselves, and to elevate other people. So thank you so much, Hurricane, for giving me that opportunity to share my thoughts with you and your audience. And I really appreciate being here today.
No, thank you. I mean, you're taking the time, and I know there's a time difference, and it's getting later there. And but yeah, this is all in good, intent, good faith, and it's really to share the value, and also to share your services. I mean, you are available, I guess, for to work with people, to share these things. People can reach out to you. Your website is www.hemavyas.com, right? Just
That's
the name?
Right, yes. Yeah, right. Just the name.
Just the name. And, so I will have that on the description. So I hope that people can interact with, and even just at least to get a feel of what they can, get as a service, and potentially help, whether it's corporate or individuals. So I hope that today's messages were very clear, very simple. It is just, literally, you got to dive in and be willing to see beyond what's beyond the obvious, I would call it.
Absolutely.
I think that's all there is. So that being said, Hema, thank you for being with us, folks. Thank you for being on the show, for listening, watching, and we'll be talking soon. New show, new day, new topic, new guest. Ciao for now. Bye-bye.